I'd like to introduce Ofer Ronen. He's in that little, there he is, up in the square. He's going to talk for about 30 minutes. He presented to the last class. It was very enjoyable, and I learned stuff about entrepreneurship. And this is his current company. And with that, Ofer, you can introduce yourself and explain what this is.
Okay, so hi everyone. Yeah, I'm Ofer, and I used to be in your shoes, computer engineering student, undergrad, uh, and I then stayed for a master's, and Professor Soloway sponsored my master's. I was a research assistant in his lab, um, working on AI before AI was as useful as it is today. Uh, I I'll go over okay, so yeah, I'm now leading a company called Tomato AI. Tomato, different ways of pronouncing it. What we do is on calls, we make thick accents not as heavy. We call it accent softening. So someone sounds like themselves, but not as heavily accented. We're focused initially on sales and support calls. So this is for call centers. And for example, here's the original voice of a Filipino speaker and then the enhanced.
I am going to connect you to the licensed agent, which is in North Carolina right now, okay?
I am going to connect you to the licensed agent, which is in North Carolina right now, okay?
So we also remove background noise, but yeah, we make in this case, the accent more Americanized for that audience. Uh, so yeah, feel free if you want to check more of these examples out on your own time. But with that, let me switch over and talk about why I love entrepreneurship, why you might want to love it, and how to go about it.
And please interrupt. They usually do.
Yeah.
But please, because I'm not monitoring the chat room or anything. So interrupt. Ask questions. Take it away.
Okay. Yeah, feel free throughout to jump in with questions. It's a sign that you're listening and engaged. So I've sold 3 startups that were valued at over $130 million, starting with Sindori, an ad network that I sold to IAC, the parent company of Match.com, Ask.com, and 30 or more brands that many of us know. Then I sold the developer tools company Pulse.io to Google, and within Google, I created Chatbase in their incubator and sold that to Google Cloud. So I've done a string of startups and yeah, learned some lessons along the way that I hope to share with you today.
What did Sindori do?
We had over 1 million domains, and when people typed them in, we would redirect to the relevant site. So AustrianStamps.com would redirect to that page on eBay where you can buy Austrian stamps, as an example. Back then, there was more what's called direct navigation. This is going back, I don't know, 15 years now. So yeah, it was related to redirecting traffic in efficient ways.
Wow.
So I talked about Tomato AI a bit. It's real-time voice generation. We actually generate a voice that sounds like yours on the fly without any pre-training, something called zero-shot models, no pre-training. And yeah, in less than a second, generate a voice that sounds like you with less accent. A lot of R&D went into it over the last year and 8 months. We're finally now starting to get a working version that we're going to sell hopefully in Q2. So it required a lot of patience and time to get to this point, which is then also what becomes your moat or helps you defend this business against others that might want to come in. A lot of unique research needed to even build a first working version. Raised $10 million. Based on my track record of selling 3 startups, less so based on traction. So either you're raising based on traction or track record. Most of the people, including myself, earlier in your career, you raise based on traction, initial traction with customers. And then if you've earned a reputation, you can also raise based on track record. Okay, but when it comes to entrepreneurship, it's good to have a reason why you're doing it. For me, I always thought I would do a big world trip for a year if I sold a startup. And so after I sold that first one, Sindori, I did with now my now wife. Proposed the first day of the trip. Bottom right, you can see our wedding, which was towards the end of the trip to 24 countries. We quit our jobs before the trip and, got to see a big part of the world. We followed summer, that way we didn't have to pack too much. So it might be something else for you, but if you have like a reason why you're going to take on the challenges of a startup and the roller coaster of a startup, something that is exciting for you, like buying your mom a house, maybe a bigger house, or something that is really exciting for you, that's going to be helping you during the hard times, because startups are a roller coaster. There's ups and downs. And one thing you should know is it won't kill you. Sometimes people are like overly concerned about, oh, what's going to happen if it doesn't work out? Well, you're going to learn a ton. You're going to grow a ton. You're going to be stretched in ways that a typical day job would not stretch you. You're going to do things that a typical job wouldn't have you do. You're wearing different hats. It's very normal in startups to, like, in the morning, maybe be a product person, then a salesperson, then a developer, all in one day. So know that the highs and lows are actually like what brings about personal growth, and all that helps feed into whatever you do next. You'll do that much better. You'll get better opportunities in your career because of it. Having problems means you're alive. When you're dead, that's when your problems will end. So pick good problems. You get to pick what problems to tackle. And an example of a good problem is, how do I feed 1 million people? By the way, that one I borrowed from Tony Robbins, who I recommend checking out. Some of you have heard of him. Good tools for growing in life. But yeah, he took on this problem of, how do I feed 1 million people? Because he grew up in a home where there wasn't enough food. And they got, for example, turkey donated once, and that helped them. Okay, what's a bad problem? A poor problem is, how do I do just enough to get by? A lot of people use this as their underlying operating system. How do I do just enough to squeeze by? Just enough. And if you think about, who do you think has a more fulfilling life? Someone whose primary question and problem is that first one or second one? Another example is, what if your problem is, how do I do something that scares me a bit every day? That's the thing you're trying to answer every day, versus, how do I avoid facing my fears? Most people use that second one as their operating system. But what if you flipped it? What if you're like, how do I do something that scares me a little bit? Well, if you think about the best things in your life, they probably came from leaning into your fears, asking that person you want to date that's scary, and you did it, and look where you're at. Or applying for a job that seemed like out of your league, and then you got it. So lean into fear. That's a good problem. Another example of a good problem is, how do I be a better version of myself? How do I keep improving who I am? Versus what most people do, which is, how do I avoid discomfort? That they always are looking for, how do I avoid discomfort? That's what's driving their life. Who do you think has a better life? Yeah, so think about what's your internal monologue that's driving your life. What are your belief structures that are driving your life, and see if you can make some tweaks. Okay, so when it comes to startups, it's always about doing. We all know those people that say, oh, I had that idea for whatever business is successful, for Uber. But no one ever builds a business without actually taking concrete action. So start doing, leave your job, whatever it is, or, start the company, and and your initial idea is always going to be wrong. And if you iterate and talk to customers and work on it, you'll get closer to a real viable business. So just start is the recommendation. And don't wait for the idea to be perfect, because it's going to be wrong and you're going to learn by doing. Now it's going to take you possibly 3.5 times until you have that big outcome that changes your life financially. This is a number that when I was taking an entrepreneurship class at Michigan, the professor mentioned. It takes 3.5 times to have your life-changing kind of outcome with startups. And so get started, get that first one in, the second one in, learn, grow, because it's going to take 3.5 times. And in terms of your wealth, with startups, it's more of a step function. So unlike working for the man and working towards someone else's dream, like a typical job, if you work towards your own dream, and you work on startups, at some point you'll have a life-changing event, outcome, an exit, and your net worth will go up substantially in a way that would take decades with a day job. Like it could be like 30 years if you do the math to get to the same result. But you'll need 3.5 times on average, so get going.
The earlier startups, did you have a failure? I mean,
Yeah.
Sendori was a success, the Pulse.io, I mean, where were the failures?
Yeah, I started the company with my brother who you met at
Yep.
Professor Subway, called Karanga when I was 24, a year after grad school. And it was a complete failure. I didn't know, we didn't have someone that can sell. I couldn't sell back then. It's a skill I've worked on and developed over the years by doing more startups. We didn't raise $1. All we knew to do is how to program. So we built something, but no one could give us feedback on it. And we weren't like working with what's called design partners, early customers. And so it was a complete failure, but in the sense of as a business. But I learned so much because I had to get in front of people and present and learn how to do things that I didn't learn up until doing that startup.
So that was a
Yeah.
failure, but was the idea still viable? It's just the time
Well,
wasn't right, or the business for a
Yeah.
business.
It was Groupon before Groupon.
Oh,
Yeah, so, and it wasn't exactly right. We had more of a B2B model, and it wasn't, we would have needed some pivots to get to be a viable business, but we never got that far. But point being that it helped me in my journey as an entrepreneur, helped me grow my skills, improve my ability to sell, and communicate ideas. And confidence-wise, when you do something the second time, it's easier. You have like a reference point. So I get going. And you can always get a day job. So let's say it doesn't work out. We're all smart, capable people. You can go get a job. Now, I would get a job in something that's interesting and maybe where you can build up skills that can then help feed into the next startup. Like go deep on a vertical or a technology, be known for something, and then use that as leverage in that next go at it.
this semester, they built an MVP 1 and an MVP 2. They're testing their MVP 2 now, I hope. And they'll be presenting on Monday. That counts for, it's just the beginning though, right? An MVP 2 is just the beginning.
Yeah, you're iterating, you're optimizing based on, hopefully on feedback from potential customers, and you're getting closer to what might be a viable business. So regardless of what happens with startups, you're gonna learn and grow more than typical jobs would have you, would help you grow in the sense that you'll be taking on more roles, more challenged, but also you're going to be acting as an owner and not operating in someone else's business. So when you're the owner and have a sense of this is your baby, you're gonna spend a ton more effort, and because of that, learn a ton more than otherwise. So you can't lose, is one way to think about it, because you're gonna learn and grow, and you have decades ahead in front of you in your career. And so any experience you can bank in earlier pays dividends even more if you have more of a runway, more time in your career. So it's all good.
Could you
Okay,
talk a
so
little bit about that breakout moment again? The idea of
yeah.
how do you know?
Okay, so there's this concept of breakthrough moment, and it can happen in an instance. And you decide something in your life. We've all had this. Like we're in an instance, and we think back to that time. We decided something big in our lives. And for me, for example, I was for years in my late 20s saying to people, "Hey, I'm going to go to business school," but I never did anything about it. And then one time I was so bored in my job, and I like went to the cafeteria and laid on my back and looked up at the ceiling, and I decided in that moment, okay, I'm going to business school. And then everything else was easy, like the GMAT and like applying. That was secondary to making a decision, a real decision, and having a real commitment around it. And so breakthrough moments happen sometimes when we've reached our breaking point. Like we've been so frustrated by something for a while and complaining about, and then in a moment we finally decide to make that change. But also it can be more proactive. You can be like, no, this is the better path for me. When I was at Google 2 years ago, and I was making good money, better than anyone at my level at Google, actually, I had a moment where I decided for the next 5 years what my goal was, which was to make $20 million, create a $20 million family foundation from which we donate from over the next 5 years. And I knew I couldn't stay at Google to get to that goal in 5 years. So I had to quit. And I did. And the next week, let Google know I was leaving. So yeah, all these things can happen in a moment. And I hope you'll have lots of these breakthrough moments in your life. Elliot, was that helpful?
Yes, yes. Did you meet Larry Page then too?
Larry Page was at Michigan when I was there,
Yep.
and he was years ahead of me. And he was the president of HKN, the Honor Society for Computer Engineering, when I joined.
Yeah.
And so I would sell like donuts in the atrium there for him and coffee to like sleepy, tired students. So I got to know Larry Page that way. So he was an acquaintance. I wasn't as close to him, but I've since, sold a couple of startups to him. So it was an acquaintance kind of relationship.
Right, right. It was interesting. Yeah, a Michigan boy. Yeah.
Okay, so let's say you decide you're going to do a startup. What are 4 important things to get right?
Get this right. Take notes. You can watch the video, but this is real important. This is good.
Well, first of all, you need to have a world-class team. And in fact, your potential investors will want to know, why is this the right team to go after this business? And so you want to recruit a team that's appropriate for the business. This is my co-founder and I, our 4th contact center AI startup. And so we have a lot of specific experience in contact center AI and are very credible in this industry we're in now. For me, I always look for a CTO and co-founder when I do a startup as a first step, because over the years, even though I studied software, I've become more the guy that sells. The CEO is typically that guy, and more of a product manager than like an hands-on engineer. And what I need is someone that can build. And so a hands-on CTO that can initially build and then recruit and has the trust of engineers because they're themselves an expert in engineering is what I look for. Someone that ideally can bring on a team pretty quickly is ideal. versus having to start from scratch in recruiting. And so I have a very specific co-founder I look for, but it's going to be different for each of us. And what you want is complementary skills and also someone that you can work well with. So either someone that you've worked with in the past that you know your working styles are similar, or someone that's come recommended from someone you trust is ideally who you'll work with. And and so that's for the founding team. And then you're going to recruit the key initial employees to round out the team.
I have a question.
Sure.
Yeah, question? Go ahead.
Like, what would you say is the largest reasonable size of a founding team in your experience?
Some pros and cons around founding team size. If the more co-founders you have, the more you're splitting up the pie in meaningful ways, the harder it is to get like a nice outcome. So I rather have one co-founder and then otherwise early employees. Like early employees might have low single digit kind of percents versus a co-founder that might have 10+% is typically, or one way to think about it. And so I don't want to have too many co-founders. I want to have like one key co-founder because being an entrepreneur can be lonely and you want to have a partner in crime. But don't stack too many people as co-founders because you're diluting your share too much, is my opinion.
Wow. Yes, James.
How do you usually go about like dividing the equity and like determining
Finding a co-founder.
Salary?
In the past, I've tapped into my network and asked people in my network for introductions to anyone they might know. I also one time went to an event, carefully curated event where highly capable people, it was like founders dating, and I found a co-founder that way. You just have to put yourself out there and see if people can introduce you to folks and go to events and do things like that. You know, in some cases, it's not going to be someone that's upfront as carefully vetted as you want, but you can maybe do a trial period, see how you work together before deciding to like create a company.
And also the question was, how do you split up the equity? How do you do that?
Okay, what you don't do is 50-50 because it's never 50-50. One of you is more experienced, more capable, more credible, often. And so often it shouldn't just be 50-50. And it's a negotiation. And one of you often gets a bigger piece of the pie, but not always. I've had cases where it was more 50-50, and that was like a non-negotiable for my CTO and co-founder. More often than not, though, like it hasn't been 50-50. And it depends, and it's a negotiation is the short answer.
It's a negotiation, but well, okay, all right.
Yeah. And by the way, if you worry about like how do you if there's a disagreement, what do you do? Hopefully you have a co-founder that you can have reasonable discussions with and can come to agreements and have some give and take. So hopefully it doesn't come down to some sort of like a board vote and like the 50-50 actually ends up mattering.
Wait, we got some more questions. Hold on, in the back. They can't hear. You gotta talk really loud because the microphone is here.
So like when you find the team, is it necessary to like hire a like lawyer or any sort of legal work to be done like before you start the company? Is that necessary?
Did you hear that?
No.
Okay. The question was, when you start the company, should you get a lawyer involved right at the beginning, or can you negotiate between the starters? Is that a good way of saying it?
Yeah, and then do you already want a contract signed before?
Yeah, look, the negotiation doesn't require a lawyer. What requires a lawyer is incorporating and getting your initial paperwork done to run as a business. And I recommend using a lawyer and getting legal right from day one. So but two separate things. The negotiation doesn't require a lawyer. The capturing of what was agreed to is where a lawyer can help.
Does that help? And you had, Shane, another one?
Yeah, do you think it's important to have like a quote unquote lead co-founder where like let's say the CEO has both like the vision, design and like the decision making power, or like as opposed to like equal splits with like no leader?
Did you get that? Did you get that, Ofer?
Yeah, I think so. If you're like the leader and decision maker, does that warrant more equity? Is that then maybe the builder, the guy building maybe the ideas? Is that the
Do you
question?
think it's important for one of the co-founders to have more equity and like have more of the power, like decision making power
Oh,
concentrated, so there's more of like a cohesive vision?
no, like in cases where I had 50-50 split with my CTO, we still like outside of the cap table did well at talking about ideas and coming to agreements. So it was separate from that equity split. The equity split is more about, at the end of the day, who's gonna like help the business grow more, who has more relevant experience to like build a large business, who's has a harder to find skill set that's won't be as easy to replace. Those kind of things matter in that equity split. And because for example, let's say, you start the business and you're like doing 70% of the contributions that help the business grow. You're doing the fundraising, you're doing all the customer work, you're the product person, and that CTO you have is great, but there's probably 5 other ones out there. Anyway, what you're hearing me do is the kind of arguments I might make as a founding CEO to get a bigger piece of the pie. But again, all this is negotiations, and at the end of the day, if it's 50-50, it's okay. You still have a very meaningful piece of the pie. So all of this really depends on the specific situation. It's hard to like speak to any, give a prescriptive answer without knowing the details of a situation. All right, but yeah, let's move on maybe.
Yep.
Unless, was there more on team?
Nope, I think okay.
Okay, so another big one is large market, and I'm sure it's come up in the past. But if you don't go after like a large market, then even if you're really successful in capturing market share, it's too small of a market to matter. So often like $1 billion in spend per year by your target customers, either now or in 5 years, if the market needs to form, is a good like litmus test. Is at least $1 billion. If it's, for example, just $100 million and you capture most of that market, that top line revenue outcome is less interesting for an investor, top line being revenue, because they want to see at least 100 million in a few years of top line revenue, and the whole market is that size. So just be careful what sandbox you're playing in. Make sure it's a big enough sandbox. Ideally, even multi-billion-dollar kind of spend by target customers per year.
But what if the market, it's not about the market, it's about solving an interesting problem? Is that a good enough reason? Well, could you get investors?
Yeah, go create a nonprofit then and do that.
Aha!
My wife has a nonprofit helping and doing musical theater with teenagers. It's actually going to approach $3 million in top line revenue. So it's decent business, local business. But she's doing it because of the lives she's changing and the impact, that she's having on kids, giving them more confidence, helping them find their community. Often they're marginalized. But that's like, she's not taking money from investors who are looking for like massive returns. And she couldn't. Like she gets instead donations.
Right. Okay.
Okay, right time. So this is one often missed by entrepreneurs when picking a business. Have some clarity around why is this the right time for this type of business. For example, when when Uber was coming out, the right time was to then, because phones were starting to be able to locate where you are using GPS, and mapping was starting to get good enough. And these relevant technologies that require, that have to be there for this kind of business to be successful were just starting to come online. And so that was the right time for Uber. So without knowing this, you'll come up against challenges with investors who might say, hey, it's too early, or maybe it's too late. You know, the market's too saturated. You know, there's not enough differentiation. You came in too late, or too early. People don't care enough about this problem. There's not enough dollars out there, and there won't be for a while. So you might have a perfect solution, but no one cares. So be clear about why is this the right time. And then lastly, sustainable advantages. Let's say you have an amazing business idea and it's perfect, and the market wants it at scale, and it's a large market size, right team, everything else is aligned. But it's really easy for anyone to build and compete. Then you have a problem on your hand, because you show the market how good a business it is, and then they copy it and compete with you, and incumbents come in with their reach, and you're toast. So you want to always be thinking about, how do I sustain my advantage in the market? And examples of that are, for example, right now, the business I'm in, Accent AI, there's not a lot of research out there. Anything out there is pretty poor. We had to do a lot of unique intellectual property development and research to get to where we're at now. And that becomes our moat, our sustainable advantage, making it hard for new entrants to reach the level of performance we have. Other examples of sustainable advantages could be a data advantage. You have data proprietary to you that no one else has. An example of that is there used to be a company that scraped the who is records for domains, and they did it for years before anyone thought about doing that. And then domains owners started hiding what domains they own, and you couldn't do it then. But they had all this information about who owned what domain, and charged $30 per lookup, and created a sizable business doing that. So that's a data advantage. No one else had the data. Google has a lot of data advantages. Another example is patents. That one is more of a defensive move for startups. You use it as a way of avoiding being sued because you're infringing. You have your own coverage. Not so much to scare anyone from doing something, because it's not too hard to overcome, like patents, by tweaking some things. Other examples are your team. Like, you have world experts. You have the one guy in the world that knows how to do this. Yeah, go ahead. Someone has their hand up.
Yeah, so I'm very interested in hearing about, like, you think that it's easy to get around patents, because for a project that I'm working on, there exists a patent in this space that has a similar functionality but works very differently to what my team and I are building. And I don't want to, like, infringe on that patent, but also I feel like my thing is sufficiently different. But, like, stuff I've read online is conflicting about whether it's, like, what the actual functionality is or how it works that's, like, matters for patents.
Yeah. So I would say a few things. Don't let ever, like, things like that hold you back, because your idea is going to change and evolve over time, and there'll be a lot of unique concepts and ideas you'll introduce to the idea over time that'll help you differentiate. So just, this goes back to, like, just get started and work on it, and don't worry, don't sweat, these kind of things. In terms of, like, eventually, if this proves to be a real business and interesting idea as a business, you could maybe spend some time with a patent lawyer just to think about what's coverage you could claim that they didn't, that's unique in this space, and how do you, if needed, work around some of the overlap or patent infringement concerns. But those are things you can hold off on for now. You don't need to think about that. It's too early. It's going to change, right? It'll change. Yeah, someone else has their hand up.
Yeah, so I had a question about the R&D team that you're talking about. How did you go about like finding the research team for your product? Was it through like the university or were you just partnering with some other employees?
Uh, Professor Solly, could you repeat that? Yeah, the
How did you
back-
find the research team that could do that kind of project? How'd you find those people?
Oh, okay, like world experts, yeah, and well, okay, there's a difference between your co-founder and then the rest of the team. And for the co-founder, yeah, you want to recruit someone that can be an expert in the field you're going into. For example, James, my co-founder, led speech AI at Google, text to speech, speech to text, a team of 30 engineers. And so he was uniquely suitable for a speech AI startup. Him and I worked together at Google for 4 years on various things. And so, yeah, and so he was the right person. But then we hired even more specialized experts that had even experience in accent AI as research scientists, but as employees, not co-founders. So, yeah, it goes back to like tapping into your network. Once you know what the idea is, you have maybe a sense for the kind of technology you need to build. Now, not all startups are deep tech like mine that require very specialized knowledge. A lot of startups are like web-based applications, with processes and workflows. And for that, there's a ton of people out there that have, as CTOs, at least that's what I'm talking about here, that skill set to build web applications that are scalable. So depending on what you're going into, there might be more or less experts out there, and it's a selling job. This is, the wider the outreach, the more likely you are, and the more sustained the outreach, the more likely you are to find the right co-founder.
I had like a follow-up.
Sure.
For like when you were talking about the investors, so what happens when you get the investment from those investors and you end up like not meeting their return? Like what happens then to your like company and like do you owe like debt and things like that?
What happens when you get money and then you don't produce? Do you owe them the money or what happens?
Got it. Yeah, so look, venture investing is a risky business that relies on home runs to sustain it. So like 8 out of 10 businesses will fail. Actually no, it's more like 7 out of 10 will fail. One will be like even. One will be like a 2-3x return, and then one will be a 10 to 20x return, and that will 20x return or so, and that will make your whole portfolio. So just know that going in, investors assume most of the startups will fail. Now, if you at some point gave up and we're like, okay, it's not going to work, and I don't have it in me to pivot and do another one, then yeah, sometimes people return the money, but that's not common. Like more often, people go at it and they try to make it work until they either can't raise anymore, or they gave up. But hopefully, it's I can't raise anymore. The market isn't responding. Let me figure out something else.
And you raise money you have to have someone who knows how to raise money.
Yeah, so there's angel investors and there's venture capital. Angel investors are usually smaller checks. Venture capital is bigger checks. Venture capital is from other people. Like, so they take money from other people called LPs, limited partners, and these GPs that run the VCs, general partners, invested on their behalf, and they're looking for certain returns. So they're looking for in 7 to 10 years to get a 3 or 4x return on the money invested by the LPs, limited partners. The angels have a lower bar. They're often looking for like a 2x return, maybe they would be happy with in 7 to 10 years. But again, that's smaller checks. And earlier stages, like in the earlier stages, you might get angels, later stages, more VCs.
Interesting. Angels, okay.
Yes. Next person.
Yeah, I was like stalking your LinkedIn a second ago, and it said that you are like an advisor and investor in some previous startups. And I was curious what you look for when you're deciding to make an investment in a startup.
So yeah, I look at these four things I'm showing you here. And also like it's a gut kind of call, like whether you think the team is credible and is going after like a market you think will be big or is big. In the earlier stages of startups, there's not a lot of information to go on, a lot of data, other than track record and things like that. In the later stages, which I've done as well, like I've invested in Anthropic, which you might have heard of, like the the second biggest LLM company, valued at 18 billion right now, which Amazon and Google just invested like 3 billion in. In that case, there's not a lot of research I need to do. Like there's a lot of signals out there already, and I've found that in late stage, like I've gone in less time, like instead of 7 to 10 years, it's a 3 to 5 year window, and the multiple could be 3 to 5x, versus like the 20x or so that early stage might give you. I did want to say one other thing about sustainable advantages, which is you could get it through legal means. You could get exclusives with the biggest customers so that they have to only work with you, and your competition is shut out. So that's another way of getting a sustainable advantage, locking in companies either through legal means, but also making the switching costs too high. There's all this customization you have to do to make the solution work, and they're already 2 years into customizing it. Good luck trying to switch vendors now. It would set you back.
Lock them in. Yeah, yeah. Well, we have questions with a few more minutes. Anything else you want to ask Ofer? Yep.
For like your first two startups, if you weren't like the technical co-founder, like what value were you really bringing to the business beyond, being like a salesperson with an idea? Like how do you build on that?
Yeah, because I made a transition, which maybe some of you will make one day, which was from being hands-on developer to more of a business guy. And it was gradual. Like I used to code in my startups up until a couple ones ago, but there was like a time when I was still like developing. I was never a great developer, by the way. Sorry, Elliot. But I found my superpower was more in the ideation, selling, product. So product, I think, is a good stepping stone. So if you're the person that has like conviction around product, this is where we need to go. This is the focus. By the way, startups need to focus. If you're like trying to do 2 or 3 things well, yeah, Elliot, I heard you say that to a student earlier. Yeah, pick one thing, do it really well, go deep, And so as a product manager, which could be something you transition into, you're helping set the vision and ensuring that features every week line up with the vision well, and you're managing the timeline. So that's probably a good stepping stone for someone that's like a developer to like consider. And then from there, more into selling, because you could be in even if you join someone else's dream, someone else's startup or company, you could ask to be in customer meetings and get some exposure to those kind of roles, and more see if you can speak up in meetings with customers, gather requirements, ask questions, clarify, and over time also sell. Did I answer your question? I don't know if I answered your question. Yeah. Okay.
We got a lot of questions here.
Yeah.
Come on.
Just to follow up to that question, how did you figure out that was your superpower, as you say? Do you have a story?
When I was 24 and doing my first startup, there was an investor I talked to that later through back channels gave the feedback that I should never be on the phone selling. I'm horrible, was his feedback. So you're going to get people questioning your abilities and skills. So never let it be some external reason In my case, it was an evolution over time. I just did more of it over time, selling, that I got better at it. But I was horrible when I first started. So yeah, have a growth mindset. Know that wherever you're at now, it's going to change if you put enough time into it. By the way, selling is good regardless of what you'll do in your career, because you're always trying to sell yourself into a better position, better pay, regardless of whether you do a startup or not. Even in our personal lives, right? We're always looking to convince others to be on board with our ideas,
Are always selling, absolutely.
Yeah. Back row.
So, like, in today's world, like, do you think it's possible to like fund your own startup with your own funding and use like social media and different like advertising platforms to like have a successful like startup?
Raise money using social media or your own money to get a startup going.
Yeah. Yeah, so crowdsourcing funding is something you can do. The risk is that you're not getting sophisticated investors that can help you, give you credibility with customers and employees and other investors down the line. So it's not often the go-to strategy to try to crowdsource. It's more like, okay, I can't raise from professional investors. Let me go try this crowdsourcing thing to see if I can get something going. I wouldn't lead with that for for high growth tech startups. I'm not talking about small businesses and local businesses. I'm talking about tech startups that need to become like $100 million revenue businesses. For those, I would go to professional investors, or sometimes people are able to do it without raising money. That's rare, and then they're not diluting. But the risk there is that you're not moving as quickly as you could because you don't have the money yet to grow the team and sales and marketing and all that. So there's risks in like organic growth without professional investors.
Wow.
So kind of on a similar note, I think like something I've noticed about a lot of like AI related startups is that the costs to get your product off the ground have grown a lot compared to like a lot of more just like simple web-based startups. And that's something that like I've faced on certain projects, which is like I'm a student with basically no credibility in the eyes of an investor, but to develop a product that people want to use, it might have really high compute costs. And so how do you like balance the two of those and try to like create a product and like prove that it's useful even if you can't afford to show it at scale?
So everything you said is true, and it's the hustlers that figure it out and find a way that win. So find a way. Now it is true. Like I luckily have a track record now of selling 3 startups to the Google OneTask.com that I could raise $6 million in 2 months right after leaving Google, where it normally takes like 6 to 18 months, and with a deck only. But I had to be in your shoes earlier in my career and show traction. To raise the initial $2 million for Sindori, by then I was already on a $4 million run rate. And so I had to like do all that to get like first round capital to lead that round. I had to have traction. And so earlier in your career, you need to like find a way to get traction. Now it's true, AI companies sometimes require a lot of money to train models. We, for example, in the peak months spent $220,000 just on Google Cloud training.
Wow.
I've been able to get down to just $100,000 or so now by doing a commit deal. Anyway, there's a lot you could talk about there. But even that is a significant amount per month of spend. And so how do you build an AI startup? Maybe you don't. Or you build an AI startup that uses other people's models. You're not creating foundational models. You're more tweaking them in ways that are more cost effective. To tweak a model is much cheaper than to train a model from the ground up. You also don't need all the data as much of the data as a foundational model. So those are the, I guess, considerations. And part of the challenge and potential growth that comes out of this challenge. So figure it out. And if you
Figure it
do,
out.
yeah, figure it out, and you're going to learn a lot on the way.
Figure it out.
Yeah.
Do you think it's worth it to base your company in San Francisco as opposed to like other places, despite like its problems?
So we're a fully remote company. We're only 2 out of we're like 11 full-time, 5 like consultants in San Francisco. So I personally, over the course of COVID, started liking work from home, and we attract people who want that, but that's not for everyone. In terms of your question about being based in San Francisco, a lot of people would say, yeah, like a lot of the investors are here, a lot of like the people that you can grow from, learn from are here. And so there's certain advantages to being here, but there's plenty of examples of people doing it from other cities. It's not a showstopper. It's more like if otherwise it works for your life, consider it because it might make some things a little easier.
The Combinator, Y Combinator, or those other incubators are pretty good, right?
Yeah. The value of an incubator is it gives you credibility. Like if you're associated with Y Combinator, right away it puts you like at a certain level that investors value. They value the screening that Y Combinator has. There's also the money, but that's not so significant. It's not much money. So it's really the reputation. You're tapping into a network of talented people, and it helps you recruit more easily and get investment more easily.
Combinator. Well, thank you, Ofer. Thank you very much. That was very helpful. And if they have questions, I'll email you.
Yeah, folks can email or connect on LinkedIn. Happy to be helpful as needed.
Heard that before. LinkedIn. Connect with him on LinkedIn.
And good luck and enjoy the weather.
One last question. Yes.
What's the email, by the way?
I'll send it out. Well, thank you, Ofer, and we'll be in touch. Thank you very much. I'll send you the URLs.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Whoa.